The sky above Zetherian shimmered with hues of violet and gold, reflecting off the towering crystalline structures that pierced the heavens. The air was thick with an electric tension, as if the planet itself knew something monumental was about to unfold. Jun stood silently among his team, his dark eyes scanning the grand hall where they had been summoned. His presence was unassuming, average height, lean build, and a calm demeanor. But there was something in the way he carried himself that hinted at untold depths. Jun wasn't like the others in his group. While they whispered nervously or fidgeted under the weight of their surroundings, he remained still, almost meditative. He had learned long ago that silence often spoke louder than words, and today, silence would serve him well. And they were here to negotiate peace between humanity and the alien empire, a task that seemed impossible given the hostility radiating from every corner of this place. The royal court was unlike anything Jun had ever seen. Massive columns stretched high into the domed ceiling, glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. Strange symbols etched into the floor pulsed softly, as though alive. At the center of it all sat Princess Unji, her throne elevated on a dais adorned with intricate carvings. She was young, perhaps no older than 25, but her sharp gaze and commanding posture made her seem far older. Her silver hair cascaded down her shoulders, catching the light like molten metal, and her piercing blue eyes scanned the room with disdain. When the humans were finally called forward, Yunji wasted no time. "Shh, you dare come before us," she began, her voice cold and cutting. "Thinking you can bargain for peace? You are nothing but insects crawling beneath our feet." Her words echoed through the chamber, met with approving murmurs from the gathered nobles. Jun didn't flinch. He simply watched her, his expression unreadable. One of his teammates stepped forward, stammering an attempt at diplomacy. "Your Highness, we mean no disrespect. We seek only—" "Silence!" Yunji snapped, rising from her throne. She descended the steps of the dais, her movements graceful yet predatory. Stopping just a few paces away from the humans, she tilted her head, studying them as one might study an exhibit at a zoo. Her gaze lingered on Jun, who met her stare without blinking. For a moment, there was something curious in her expression, but it quickly hardened into contempt. "You," she said, pointing directly at him, "you think you belong here, among beings far superior to your kind?" Her tone dripped with mockery. "Let me make this clear. You won't last. Not here, not anywhere." The room fell silent, waiting for Jun's response. But he said nothing. Instead, he gave a small nod, acknowledging her words without argument. To anyone else, it might have looked like submission, but those who truly understood Jun knew better. Beneath his quiet exterior lay centuries of experience, battles fought across galaxies, and a reputation that struck fear into even the most powerful empires. Yet none of that showed on his face now. He merely stood there, patient and composed. Yunji narrowed her eyes, clearly irritated by his lack of reaction. "Why, prove yourself then," she declared, turning back toward her throne. "Tomorrow, you will face one of my elite guards in combat. If you survive, perhaps I'll consider hearing more of your pathetic plea for peace." With that, the audience ended. Guards ushered the humans out of the hall, leaving Jun alone with his thoughts as they returned to their quarters. Back inside their temporary lodging, his teammates erupted into panicked discussion. "She's insane!" one of them exclaimed. "This isn't negotiation, it's a death sentence!" Another chimed in, pacing furiously. "What does she expect us to do? Fight her warriors? We're not soldiers." Jun listened quietly, letting their frustration run its course. When the room finally grew quiet, he spoke, his voice steady and calm. "We don't have a choice. Refusing means certain failure. If fighting gives us a chance." "But how are we supposed to win against someone like that?" another teammate asked, gesturing wildly. Did you see the size of their guards? They're monsters. Hae-jun allowed himself a faint smile. Size doesn't always matter. His confidence, though subtle, seemed to reassure the others slightly. Still, doubts lingered in their minds. None of them could understand why Hae-jun appeared so unfazed. What they didn't know, and what Yoonji couldn't possibly imagine, was that Hae-jun had faced far worse than anything this alien empire could throw at him. That night, as the others tried unsuccessfully to sleep, Hae-jun sat by the window, gazing out at the alien landscape. The shimmering crystals cast strange shadows across his face, highlighting the faint scars etched into his skin. Each mark told a story, a battle won, a life spared, a lesson learned. He had walked away from his violent past, seeking redemption and purpose, but sometimes the universe had other plans. As dawn approached, Hae-jun closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Tomorrow would be a test, not just of strength, but of patience and restraint. He didn't want to fight, but he wouldn't shy away from it either. Whatever happened, he would handle it as he always did, with precision, control, and an unwavering sense of justice. And somewhere deep within the palace, Princess Yoonji lay awake, unable to shake the image of the human who had refused to bow. There was something unsettling about him, something she couldn't quite place. Perhaps it was the way he carried himself, as if he held secrets too dangerous to share. Or perhaps it was the glimmer of amusement she thought she'd seen in his eyes when she challenged him. Whatever it was, Yoonji resolved to find out. Little did she know, her curiosity would lead her down a path she could never have anticipated. For while she saw weakness in Hae-jun, she failed to recognize the truth. Beneath his quiet exterior lurked a force capable of reshaping worlds, and oblivious to the danger she courted, she had already set events into motion that would change everything, for both of them. The morning sun rose over Zetherion, casting long shadows across the crystalline arena where Hae-jun stood. The structure was massive, its walls gleaming with an iridescent glow that seemed alive under the light. Rows of seats spiraled upward, already filled with spectators eager to witness what they believed would be a quick and humiliating defeat for the human challenger. The air buzzed with anticipation, punctuated by murmurs of disdain and laughter directed at Hae-jun. Hae-jun paid no attention to the crowd. His focus remained sharp, his mind clear as he waited in the center of the arena. He wore simple armor provided by the palace, lightweight but functional, and carried no weapon except a short blade strapped to his side. It wasn't much, but it was enough. For Hae-jun, tools were secondary. His greatest strength lay in his ability to adapt, observe, and strike with precision when the time came. Opposite him stood Kael, one of Princess Eunji's most formidable warriors. Towering nearly 7 feet tall, Kael's muscular frame was covered in thick, scaled armor that shimmered like molten metal. His eyes glowed faintly red, and his claws extended from his fingers, each one razor-sharp and designed for tearing through flesh. The crowd roared as Kael stepped forward, pounding his chest with a fist to signal his readiness. Yoonji watched from her royal box above the arena, her expression unreadable. She had chosen Kael specifically because of his reputation for brutality. If anyone could break the human's composure, or worse, end his life, it was him. Yet there was a flicker of curiosity in her gaze as she studied Hae-jun. Despite her earlier dismissal of him, something about his calm demeanor unsettled her. Still, she pushed the thought aside, confident in Kael's abilities. The match began without ceremony. A gong sounded, echoing through the arena, and Kael charged forward like a storm unleashed. The ground trembled beneath his heavy footsteps as he closed the distance between them, his claws slashing through the air with deadly intent. The crowd cheered wildly, expecting bloodshed within moments. But Hae-jun didn't move to meet him head-on. Instead, he sidestepped gracefully, avoiding Kale's initial attack with ease. His movements were fluid, almost effortless, as though he had anticipated every step Kale would take. When Kale swung again, Hai-Jun ducked low, driving his shoulder into the alien's midsection. The impact sent Kale stumbling backward, momentarily off balance. The crowd fell silent, their cheers replaced by stunned gasps. No one had expected the human to counter so effectively. Even Yunji leaned forward slightly, her interest piqued. Kyle recovered quickly, eyes snarling in anger as he launched another assault. This time his attacks came faster, more ferocious. Claws slashed downward, narrowly missing Hai-Jun's head as he rolled to the side. Another swipe grazed his arm, tearing through the fabric of his armor and drawing a thin line of blood. But Hai-Jun didn't falter. Instead, he used Kale's momentum against him, grabbing the alien's wrist and twisting it sharply. There was a sickening crack as Kale's arm bent unnaturally, forcing him to drop to one knee. The crowd erupted into chaos, some shouting in outrage while others watched in awe. Kale roared in pain, trying to lash out with his uninjured hand, but Hai-Jun was faster. With a swift motion, he disarmed Kale of his remaining clawed gauntlet and pressed the tip of his own blade against the alien's throat. For a moment, everything froze. Hai-Jun's breathing was steady, his stance relaxed, despite the tension radiating from the audience. Kyle glared up at him, hatred burning in his glowing red eyes, but he made no further attempt to fight. He knew he was beaten. To everyone's surprise, Hai-Jun lowered his blade. Without a word, he stepped back, allowing Kale to rise unsteadily to his feet. The gesture was deliberate, a show of restraint rather than weakness. As Kale retreated, clutching his injured arm, the arena fell into an uneasy silence. Yunji stared down at Hai-Jun, her brow furrowed. She hadn't expected this outcome. Most challengers would have killed Kyle outright, using the opportunity to assert dominance. But Hai-Jun had shown mercy, sparing his opponent's life even after defeating him so decisively. It was a move that defied logic, especially coming from someone she had dismissed as weak and insignificant. As the match concluded, the crowd began to murmur among themselves. Some praised Hai-Jun's skill, calling him a worthy adversary. Others accused him of cowardice, claiming he should have finished Kyle to prove his superiority. Amidst the conflicting reactions, Yunji felt a strange mix of emotions stirring within her, anger, confusion, and something else she couldn't quite name. Respect? No, that couldn't be right. Humans weren't capable of earning such regard. Later that evening, Hai-Jun returned to the quarters assigned to him and his team. His teammates greeted him with a mixture of relief and admiration. They had watched the fight from the sidelines, their nerves stretched taut as they witnessed Hai-Jun's seemingly impossible victory. "How did you do it?" one of them asked, still shaken. "That guy looked like he could crush us all with one hand." Hai-Jun shrugged, inspecting the shallow cut on his arm. "It's not about size or strength," he said simply. "It's about knowing your opponent and yourself." His words offered little comfort to the others, who struggled to comprehend how Hai-Jun had managed to stay so composed under pressure. To them, he remained an enigma, a man whose past was shrouded in mystery and whose abilities bordered on superhuman. Meanwhile, Yunji paced restlessly in her private chambers. Her thoughts kept returning to the image of Hai-Jun standing victorious in the arena, his blade poised yet unused. Why had he spared Kale? What kind of being possessed such control over their instincts? These questions gnawed at her, refusing to let her rest. Determined to find answers, she summoned Hai-Jun to her chambers later that night. When he arrived, escorted by guards, she dismissed them immediately, leaving the two of them alone. The room was dimly lit, the only illumination coming from soft, glowing orbs suspended in midair. Yunji stood near the window, her back turned to him as she gazed out at the city below. "You surprised me today," she said finally, her voice quieter than usual. I didn't expect you to win. Haijun inclined his head slightly. Winning wasn't my goal. Survival was. Yunji turned to face him, her piercing blue eyes locking onto his. Then why didn't you kill him? You had the chance. Most warriors wouldn't hesitate. Killing isn't always necessary, Haijun replied calmly. Sometimes showing restraint speaks louder than violence. Yunji frowned, he clearly unsatisfied with his answer. Restraint doesn't win wars. Weakness gets people killed. I'm not weak, Haijun said, his tone firm but measured. And I'm not here to start a war. I'm here to prevent one. For a moment, Yunji said nothing. She studied him closely, searching for any sign of deception or arrogance. But all she found was sincerity, a quiet confidence that neither sought approval nor feared judgment. It unnerved her, challenging everything she thought she knew about humans. Finally, she sighed, turning away again. You confuse me, human. One moment, you seem harmless. The next, you're something else entirely. Haijun smiled faintly, though she didn't see it. Perhaps that's the point. With that, he bowed respectfully and left the chamber, leaving Yunji alone with her thoughts. As the door closed behind him, and she sank into a chair, rubbing her temples. For the first time in years, she felt uncertain. Not just about Haijun, but about herself. Who was this man who defied expectations at every turn? And why did she feel drawn to uncover the truth about him? Little did she know, the answers to those questions would lead her down a path far more complex and dangerous than she ever imagined. For now, however, she resolved to keep watching, waiting for the moment when Haijun's true nature would reveal itself completely. Until then, she would bide her time, torn between suspicion and fascination. The days following the arena battle passed in a blur of whispered rumors and guarded glances. Haijun's victory over Kale had become the talk of the palace, sparking debates among nobles and commoners alike. Some hailed him as a formidable warrior who deserved respect, while others dismissed his triumph as mere luck or trickery. Princess Yunji, however, remained conflicted. Her curiosity about Haijun only deepened, but so did her frustration. She couldn't decide whether he was an asset or a threat, and that uncertainty gnawed at her. One morning, Yunji summoned Haijun to the throne room. When he arrived, she wasted no time getting to the point. You've proven yourself capable of surviving combat, she said, her tone clipped. But true strength isn't measured by how well you fight in an arena. It's tested in real challenges. Haijun raised an eyebrow slightly, intrigued but cautious. What kind of challenge are we talking about? Yunji gestured toward a holographic map projected onto the floor. It displayed a treacherous route through jagged mountains and dense forests, leading to a distant city ruled by one of Zetherian's rival factions. I'm traveling there to negotiate a trade agreement, she explained. You'll accompany me as part of my escort. If you can survive this journey without slowing us down, perhaps I'll reconsider your role in these negotiations. Her words carried a thinly veiled insult, but Haijun didn't rise to the bait. Instead, he gave a small nod. Understood. The convoy departed later that day, consisting of Yunji, her royal guards, several advisors, and Haijun. The journey promised to be grueling, taking them through some of the planet's most hostile terrain. As they ventured deeper into the wilderness, the air grew colder, and the landscape became increasingly unforgiving. And towering cliffs loomed overhead, their surfaces slick with ice, while narrow paths wound precariously along sheer drops. Yunji rode at the front of the group on a sleek, six-legged mount native to Zetherian. Its shimmering scales reflected the pale sunlight, making it look almost ethereal. Haejun walked beside the convoy, preferring the stability of his own 2 feet to the unpredictability of alien creatures. His steady pace matched the rhythm of the caravan, allowing him to observe both the environment and those around him. It wasn't long before trouble found them. On the 2nd day of their journey, the group encountered a collapsed bridge spanning a deep ravine. The path ahead was blocked, forcing them to find an alternate route. While the Royal Engineers worked to stabilize the structure temporarily, Haejun wandered off to scout the area. He moved quietly, his senses attuned to the smallest details, a rustle in the bushes, the faint scent of smoke carried by the wind. Suddenly, a low growl echoed through the trees. Haejun froze, his hand instinctively reaching for the blade at his side. From the shadows emerged a pack of predatory creatures, their bodies covered in thick fur and their eyes glowing with hunger. They circled him cautiously, waiting for the right moment to strike. Before they could attack, Haejun acted. With swift, calculated movements, he drew his blade and lunged forward, dispatching the first creature with a single strike. The others hesitated, snarling angrily, but Haejun didn't give them time to regroup. He moved like water, flowing between their attacks and striking with precision. Within moments, the remaining beasts fled, leaving behind their fallen comrades. When Haejun returned to the convoy, none of the others even noticed his absence until he pointed out the danger he had neutralized. Yunji's expression darkened as she surveyed the carnage. "You went alone?" she demanded, her voice sharp. "That was reckless." "I handled it," Haejun replied simply, brushing dirt from his hands. "No harm done." "No harm?" Yunji snapped. "If those creatures had attacked the convoy?" "But they didn't," Haejun interrupted, meeting her gaze steadily. "Because I dealt with them." For a moment, Yunji looked as though she wanted to argue further, but something in Haejun's calm demeanor stopped her. Instead, she turned away, muttering under her breath. Yet despite her outward annoyance, and she couldn't deny the relief she felt, knowing he had protected them, all without seeking recognition or praise. As the journey continued, similar incidents occurred. Whether it was navigating treacherous terrain, predicting ambushes, or calming spooked mounts, Haejun consistently demonstrated skills far beyond what anyone expected of a human. Each success chipped away at Yunji's skepticism, replacing it with reluctant admiration. Still, she refused to acknowledge it openly, masking her growing respect with biting remarks and thinly veiled tests of loyalty. One evening, as the group set up camp near a frozen lake, Yunji approached Haejun while he sat by the fire. She carried 2 cups of steaming liquid, offering one to him wordlessly. Haejun accepted it, nodding in thanks. "You're not what I thought you'd be," she admitted after a moment of silence. Her tone was softer than usual, almost hesitant. "Humans aren't supposed to adapt like you do." "Not all humans are the same," Haejun said, sipping the drink. It was warm and sweet, a welcome contrast to the bitter cold surrounding them. "Some of us learn to survive in places where survival seems impossible." Yunji frowned, staring into the flames. "Why did you come here? To Zetherian, I mean. You could have stayed wherever you came from, lived a quiet life, avoided all this." Haejun paused, considering her question. "I came because I wanted to make a difference," he said finally. "There's too much hatred in the galaxy, too many people willing to destroy rather than build. Maybe I can help change that." Yunji scoffed, although there was no real malice in her voice. "Idealistic nonsense. Peace doesn't last. Strength is the only thing that matters." "Strength without purpose is meaningless," Haejun countered gently. "And peace isn't weak. It's harder to achieve than war. That's why it's worth fighting for." Yunji fell silent, her thoughts swirling. She had spent her entire life believing in the superiority of her species, in the inevitability of conflict and dominance. Yet, here was a human, a being she had once dismissed as inferior, challenging everything she thought she knew. It infuriated her, but also intrigued her in ways she couldn't fully understand. Their conversation was interrupted by shouts from the edge of the camp. A group of rogue mercenaries had appeared, their weapons drawn and their intentions clear. They outnumbered the convoy, their leader barking orders as they surrounded the travelers. "Stay behind me," Haijun said, rising to his feet. His voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it, a promise of violence if provoked. Yunji hesitated, torn between pride and pragmatism. Finally, she nodded, stepping back as Haijun moved to confront the attackers. What followed was a blur of motion and sound. Haijun fought with a grace and efficiency that left the mercenaries reeling. Every strike was precise, every movement deliberate. Within minutes, the attackers were either dead or retreating, their morale shattered. When the dust settled, Yunji stared at Haijun in stunned silence. He stood amidst the chaos, breathing evenly, his blade dripping with blood. For the first time, she allowed herself to truly see him, not as a human, not as an outsider, but as someone extraordinary. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Haijun met her gaze, his expression unreadable. "Just a man trying to do the right thing." Yunji didn't respond. She couldn't. All she could do was watch as he cleaned his blade and returned to the camp, leaving her to wrestle with the realization that she had underestimated him in every possible way. By the time they reached their destination, Yunji's perspective had shifted irrevocably. She still didn't trust Haijun completely, but she no longer saw him as a mere human. He was something more, something she couldn't yet define. And as they prepared for the diplomatic meetings ahead, she found herself wondering how much of his true nature he had yet to reveal. The negotiations in the rival city were tense. A delicate dance of words and posturing between Princess Yunji and the leaders of the opposing faction. The room was large and cold, its walls adorned with intricate carvings that depicted ancient battles and conquests. A long table separated the two sides, with Yunji seated at the head of her delegation. Haijun stood quietly behind her, his presence both unobtrusive and commanding. To the casual observer, he appeared to be nothing more than a guard or advisor, but those who had witnessed his actions during the journey knew better. As the discussions dragged on, it became clear that the rival faction had no real intention of reaching an agreement. Their demands were unreasonable, their tone dismissive, and they mocked Yunji's authority and questioned the legitimacy of her rule. Part 4. The truth unveiled. The negotiations in the rival city were tense, a delicate dance of words and posturing between Princess Yunji and the leaders of the opposing faction. The room was large and cold, its walls adorned with intricate carvings that depicted ancient battles and conquests. A long table separated the two sides, with Yunji seated at the head of her delegation. Haijun stood quietly behind her, his presence both unobtrusive and commanding. To the casual observer, he appeared to be nothing more than a guard or advisor, but those who had witnessed his actions during the journey knew better. As the discussions dragged on, it became clear that the rival faction had no real intention of reaching an agreement. Their demands were unreasonable, yet their tone dismissive. They mocked Yunji's authority and questioned the legitimacy of her rule, clearly trying to provoke her into losing control. But Yunji remained composed, her expression cool and unreadable. She had learned from watching Haijun. Patience was often the most powerful weapon. Still, the strain was evident in her sharp glances and tightly clenched fists. When the session finally ended for the day, she retreated to her private quarters, visibly frustrated. Haijun followed silently, closing the door behind them before speaking. "They're stalling," he said simply, leaning against the wall. "They don't want peace." Yunji sighed, running a hand through her silver hair. "I know," she admitted, "but we can't afford to walk away empty-handed. If this alliance falls apart, it could mean war." Haijun nodded thoughtfully. "Oh, war isn't always avoidable," he said, "but sometimes there's another way." "What do you mean?" Yunji asked, turning to face him. Instead of answering directly, Haijun stepped closer, his dark eyes locking onto hers. "You've been testing me since we met," he began, "pushing me, challenging me. Why?" Yunji hesitated, caught off guard by the question. "Because I needed to know if you were trustworthy," she replied after a moment. "If you were strong enough to stand beside me, or against me." "And what have you decided?" Haijun pressed, his voice calm but firm. Yunji looked away, her gaze drifting to the window where the city skyline stretched out beneath the stars. "I don't know," she admitted softly. "You confuse me, human. One moment, you seem ordinary. The next, you're something else entirely. Who are you, really? A Haijun?" For the first time since they'd met, Haijun allowed himself to lower his guard. He took a deep breath, then began to speak. "My name is not important," he said slowly. "What matters is what I've done, and why I'm here now. Once I was a soldier. Then I became something worse, a conqueror. I fought wars across galaxies, dismantling empires and leaving destruction in my wake. People called me the Silent Reaper. They feared me." Yunji stared at him, her blue eyes wide with shock. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you need to understand," Haijun continued. "I walked away from that life because I realized I didn't want to be a destroyer anymore. I wanted to protect, to help build instead of tear down. That's why I came to Zetherian. Not because I believed in your empire, but because I saw a chance to make a difference." The room fell silent as Yunji processed his words. She had suspected there was more to him than met the eye, but hearing the truth aloud left her reeling. "Why should I believe you?" she asked finally, her voice trembling slightly. "How do I know you're not lying?" Haijun smiled faintly, though there was no humor in it. "You don't," he said. "Trust isn't given. It's earned. All I can do is show you who I am, one action at a time." Before Yunji could respond, the door burst open and one of her guards rushed inside. "Your Highness!" he exclaimed out of breath. "There's been an assassination attempt." Yunji's heart sank. "Who's the target?" "You," the guard replied grimly. "We intercepted a group of assassins heading toward your chambers. They're armed and dangerous." Without hesitation, Haijun moved to stand in front of Yunji, his body tense and ready. "Stay behind me," he ordered, his tone leaving no room for argument. The guards led them to a secure location within the building, but Haijun insisted on checking the perimeter himself. His instincts told him the threat wasn't over, and he was right. As they reached the designated safe room, shadows detached themselves from the walls, revealing the assassins. They wore black armor that blended seamlessly with the darkness, their weapons gleaming ominously in the dim light. "Protect her," Haijun said to the guards, stepping forward to face the attackers alone. His blade slid smoothly from its sheath, catching the faint glow of emergency lights. The fight was brutal and fast-paced. The assassins were skilled, moving with precision and coordination, but Haijun was faster. He anticipated their every move, countering their attacks with ruthless efficiency. Each strike was calculated, each step deliberate. Within moments, the floor was littered with bodies, the remaining assassins retreating in disarray. When the last attacker fell, Haijun turned back to Yunji, his chest rising and falling with exertion. Blood stained his hands and armor, but his expression remained calm. "It's over," he said simply. Yunji stared at him, her emotions warring between awe and fear. She had seen glimpses of his strength before, but this was different. This was raw power unleashed, a force of nature contained within the body of a man. And yet, Despite everything, he had protected her without hesitation. "Why did you do it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You could have let them kill me." Haejun shook his head. "Yeah, that's not who I am," he said. "I protect those who deserve it. You may not trust me yet, but I chose to stand by you. That means something." Tears welled up in Yoonji's eyes, though she quickly blinked them away. For years, she had prided herself on her independence, her ability to handle anything life threw at her. But in that moment, she realized how much she had come to rely on Haejun, not just as a warrior, but as someone who understood her struggles and shared her burden. "Thank you," she said finally, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her, "for saving my life, and for showing me the truth." Haejun inclined his head slightly. "You're welcome." In the days that followed, the failed assassination attempt sent shockwaves through the palace. Rumors spread about Haejun's role in thwarting the attack, in earning him both praise and suspicion. Some viewed him as a hero, while others saw him as a potential threat to the throne. Yoonji, however, no longer doubted his intentions. She had seen the depth of his character, the weight of his past, and the sincerity of his desire to help. Together, they returned to Zetharian, where Yoonji addressed the royal court publicly. Standing before her subjects, she acknowledged Haejun's contributions and advocated for greater cooperation between humans and aliens. Her words carried newfound conviction, inspired by the man who had changed her perspective in ways she never thought possible. For Haejun, the journey was far from over. He knew there would always be challenges ahead, battles to fight and lives to save. But for the first time in years, he felt a sense of purpose, a belief that his choices mattered, not just for himself, but for the galaxy as a whole. And so, as the sun set over Zetharian, casting the crystalline structures in hues of gold and crimson, Haejun stood beside Yoonji, ready to face whatever came next. Together, they represented hope, a fragile but enduring bond between two worlds, united by trust and forged in adversity. The days following their return to Zetharian were a whirlwind of activity. Princess Yoonji's public acknowledgement of Haejun's heroism had sparked both admiration and unrest among the nobility. Some factions within the royal court saw him as a symbol of hope, a bridge between humanity and aliens, while others viewed him as a dangerous outsider who needed to be controlled or eliminated. Whispers filled the halls, a plotting and scheming behind closed doors. It was only a matter of time before tensions boiled over. Haejun sensed the brewing storm but chose not to act prematurely. He spent his days training quietly in the palace courtyard, honing his skills and preparing for whatever might come. His movements were deliberate, each strike of his blade precise and measured. To anyone watching, he appeared calm and focused, but beneath the surface, his mind raced with possibilities. He knew that peace was fragile, especially when built on shifting foundations of trust and fear. Yoonji, meanwhile, worked tirelessly to solidify her position as ruler. She held meetings with advisors, drafted new policies aimed at fostering unity between species, and addressed the public through broadcasts meant to inspire confidence. Yet, despite her outward strength, she couldn't shake the feeling that danger loomed just beyond the horizon. Every shadow seemed darker, every silence heavier. And though she tried to push these thoughts aside, they lingered like a storm cloud waiting to break. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of violet and orange, Yoonji found herself pacing restlessly in her chambers. Her mind kept returning to the assassination attempt during their diplomatic mission. Who had sent those assassins? What did they want? These questions gnawed at her, refusing to let her rest. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. When she opened it, she found Haejun standing there, his expression calm but alert. "You look troubled," he said simply, stepping inside at her invitation. "I am," Yoonji admitted, sinking into a chair. "Something feels off. I can't explain it, but I know we're being watched." Haejun nodded, unsurprised. "I've noticed too," he said. "There's a conspiracy forming. Someone wants us gone." Yoonji frowned. "Who?" "That's what we need to find out," Haejun replied. "But we won't get answers by sitting here." Together, they devised a plan. Under the guise of routine inspections, Haejun began investigating key members of the royal court, paying close attention to those who had shown open hostility toward humans. Meanwhile, Eunji used her influence to gather intelligence from trusted allies within the palace. The process was slow and painstaking, requiring patience and precision, but neither of them wavered. Their efforts paid off sooner than expected. Late one night, while reviewing intercepted communications, the Haejun uncovered evidence of a plot to overthrow Yoonji and frame him for treason. The conspirators planned to stage an attack on the palace, pinning the blame on Haejun to justify their coup. With this knowledge, Yoonji and Haejun moved quickly to turn the tables. On the eve of the planned uprising, Haejun positioned himself strategically throughout the palace, using his intimate knowledge of its layout to anticipate the conspirators' movements. Yoonji remained in the throne room, surrounded by loyal guards, ready to confront the traitors directly. As midnight approached, the air grew thick with tension. When the attackers finally struck, chaos erupted. Armed rebels stormed the palace, their shouts echoing through the corridors as they searched for Yoonji and Haejun. But they were met with resistance at every turn. Haejun moved like a ghost, striking swiftly and vanishing into the shadows before the rebels could regroup. Each encounter weakened their numbers, sowing confusion and panic among their ranks. In the throne room, Yoonji faced the leader of the conspiracy, a high-ranking noble named Lord Jae-hyun, whose ambition had driven him to betrayal. Surrounded by his remaining followers, Jae-hyun sneered at Yoonji. "Your reign ends tonight, princess," he declared, raising his weapon. "And your human pet will burn for his crimes." Before Yoonji could respond, Haejun appeared silently behind Jae-hyun, disarming him with a single fluid motion. The other rebels froze, unsure whether to fight or flee. Haejun's presence alone was enough to cow them, his reputation now legendary even among his enemies. "It's over," Yoonji said, stepping forward. Her voice was steady, commanding. "Lay down your weapons or face judgment for your treachery." One by one, the rebels surrendered, their faces pale with fear. Jae-hyun stared at Haejun, hatred burning in his eyes. "You think this changes anything?" he spat. "You're still just a human." "And you're still just a coward," Haejun replied calmly, securing Jae-hyun's hands with restraints. With the immediate threat neutralized, Yoonji addressed the court publicly once more. Standing before her subjects, she revealed the full extent of the conspiracy and praised Haejun for his role in stopping it. "This man," she said, gesturing to him, "risked everything to protect not just me but all of you. He has shown us that strength lies not in domination, but in unity." Her words resonated deeply, earning cheers from the crowd. For the first time in years, hope began to take root in the hearts of Zetherian's people. Walls that had once divided humans and aliens started to crumble, replaced by tentative bridges of understanding and cooperation. For Haejun, the victory was bittersweet. He had no desire for power or recognition. His goal had always been to foster peace. Now, seeing the seeds of change beginning to sprout, he felt a quiet sense of fulfillment. Yet he also knew that his journey wasn't truly over. There would always be battles to fight, lessons to teach, and lives to save. In the weeks that followed, Yoonji offered Haejun a permanent place in her inner circle, urging him to stay and help guide Zetherian toward a brighter future. But Haejun declined, choosing instead to remain a guardian figure, an advisor and protector available whenever needed. "My path is my own," he told her gently. "But I'll always be here if you need me." Yunji accepted his decision, though it saddened her. Over time, their bond deepened, evolving into something neither of them had anticipated. They were no longer merely ruler and ally. They were friends, united by shared experiences and mutual respect. As Haejun prepared to leave the palace, Yunji accompanied him to the gates. The morning sun cast long shadows across the ground, highlighting the scars etched into his skin, marks of battles fought and lives changed. She studied him for a moment, then spoke softly. "You've given me so much," she said. "Strength, wisdom, courage. How can I ever repay you?" Haejun smiled faintly, meeting her gaze. "By continuing to lead with compassion and conviction," he replied. "That's all anyone can ask for." With that, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the shimmering landscape of Zetherian. Behind him, Yunji stood watching until his figure faded from sight. Though their paths diverged, their connection endured, a testament to the power of trust and redemption. And so, as the galaxy continued to spin, Haejun moved forward, guided by purpose and resolve. He carried the weight of his past with grace, using it not as a burden but as a foundation for the future. Wherever he went, he left behind ripples of change, inspiring others to believe in the possibility of a better world. In the end, Haejun proved that true strength wasn't about destruction. It was about creation, about building bridges where none existed, healing wounds that seemed irreparable, and reminding others that even in the darkest times, light could still prevail.